Hey everybody, Matt here for Imagined and May. Thanks for stopping by. This video is going to be part 4 of learning Python for complete beginners. If you missed any of the earlier episodes, just look in the video description for links. At the end of the last video, we were just playing around with this simple little program right here. We were exploring getting some input into our program using the input command. Because let's remember, as a quick review, a computer program, a software computer program, does basically, in very, very general terms, 3 things. It receives information or input into the program, it processes that information or data in the program, and then as a result of processing, it generates some kind of an output. Super general terms. At the end of the last video, I was showing this. Okay, so don't confuse this with this. This is the new execution of this program. So what's your name? So this time I'll type in something different so that it distinguishes itself from here. So I'll say Frank. And I press enter. Now Frank has been entered into the variable called message, but like we were saying last time, you can't really see that that's what's happened. Okay, so here's the second prompt. What is your name? So this time I'll put Sam. Okay, so I think you'll agree that I've got 2 different names this time than I did the last time. Okay, and the name Sam has been put into the variable message2. Right here, but we don't see that. So let's change that part, okay? Now print, open parentheses, quote, message, and then I'll put a colon, and then a space, a close quote, a comma, and then the variable name message. Let's see if that works. And I put a close parenthesis. Okay, so let's just save this and run this. So here's another little tip I'll share with you. This is something I've been doing for years, and sometimes it's really helped me. So I have the name of my program, right? Still the very fancy name, input message, but let's make it a little fancier. And what I've been known to do from time to time is that I put the date in front, the date of my revision. Right now, we're just making a revision. You see there's an asterisk right up here. That means the program's changed, but it hasn't been saved yet. So I like to put a date here. So this is 2025. I'm going to use a hyphen sign, not a slash symbol. That would confuse the operating system, which is Windows in my case, Windows 10. So I'm going to put the year, which is 2025, then a dash or a hyphen, call it a minus sign, it's all the same thing. 2025 dash, and then it's January, so that's 01. And today, and put another dash, and today is my watch says it's the 3rd, so it must be the 3rd. So I'm going to put dash 03, and then a space. Okay, so now let's just run this. Okay, so we restarted the Python interpreter. So these were our previous executions. So what's my name? So this time, what should we do this time? Let's do Steve. And then I'm going to press enter. And then it's going to ask me for what's my name again. And remember, Steve should be inside of the message variable, which in a second, we're going to attempt to print out. Okay, so now let's do John. Press enter. Okay, so now look at the 3rd line of output here. Message, colon, space, Steve. So Steve is what I typed in when I was first asked, what's my name? And then that got stored into the variable called message. And then in this line right here, I'm printing some text. It's like a label to describe what it is that's going to follow. So my label is just the name of my variable called message, and then a colon, a space, a close quote, a comma, and then the word message, the variable name message. And that's what gets message, colon, space, Steve printed to the screen. Okay, so we could also do print, open parentheses, message 2, colon, space, close quote, comma, message 2, close parentheses. Okay, so let's save this. Asterisk is gone, so it's saved. Let's run this. Okay, so we have interpreter restarted. What's my name? I'm running out of names. Let's type Bill. And what's my other name? I'm going to type in William. Press enter. So message is Bill, and message 2 is William. Okay, so this is a little, so far what I'm trying to illustrate is you can use the input command to receive input into your program, to push information or data, text into your program using the input command. And you can help the user by providing a prompt in the input command so the user knows what data they're actually going to input. Okay, and then the program receives it, it sticks the information into the variable, and then after the two names have been received, then we print out each one of the two names. So we have input, we have processing because we've stored it in the variable, in the variables, and then we have output because we printed the contents of those variables. So this very simple program accomplishes the three things that I'm trying to describe that a computer program needs to do in general. Okay, so let's play with this program a little bit more. How about let's change this? Let's change this to say, what would you like to say? Okay, so that's very general. And that's going to be message number 1. And then I'm going to press enter at the end of line 1 to give me a space for line number 2. And I'm going to just copy this. Actually, I'm going to cut it, click here, and then right click, paste. So as soon as, and then I'll press enter just so we have a blank line right there. So first we're going to input what would you like to say, and whatever I type in there, that's going to get stored in this variable called message. And then immediately thereafter, I'm going to print the contents of the variable message. Okay, and then message 2, let's leave it as what's your name, and then we'll move that up and print immediately after message 2 colon and then the contents of the variable message 2. So let's save this and run it, see what happens. What would I like to say? Okay, so I can already see something I want. First thing I want to say is I want to change it, right? So I forgot to put a question mark here and a space, but we'll fix that momentarily. I would like to say experimenting with Python code is fun, period. And then the next thing that happens is it prints out experimenting with Python. Oop, I put an M and not an N. Code is fun. So you see, we inputted information, we stored it in a variable, and then we printed the contents of the variable. Okay, what's your name? So I'm going to go with my legitimate name, and there it is. Okay, so let's work on this program a little bit more. First, I want to put a question mark and a space for reasons I described earlier in a previous video. And then right here, notice there's a blank line, but when the output was printed, there's no blank line. There's a bunch of different ways to insert a blank line, but one of them, we already know enough about the print statement. If I type in another print statement right here, and I got my open parentheses, my double quote, and if I just press the space key, double quote, and a closed parenthesis, let's save this and see if that gives me a line, a blank line, between the message 1 and message 2. It should go right there. So let's run this. What would you like to say? I'll just make it easier. This time I'll spell Python with an N. Python is fun, exclamation mark. Okay, message, Python is fun. And now we'll look what we have. We have a blank line before it asks me, what is your name? And I'm going to still say Matt. And there we go. So what I'm trying to illustrate for you is that writing programs is an iterative process. So, and there's lots of different ways to organize your ideas. What I tend to do, not that you have to do it this way, but what I tend to do, and it's served me very well on lots of different platforms over the years, is that I write a bunch of little test programs to help me identify work toward a final solution to my problem, okay? So we could consider this like a little simple test program. And the problem I'm trying to solve and illustrate for myself with this little test program is, how do I receive data in my program? How do I store it in a variable so I can retrieve it later on? And then how do I retrieve it and print it so I can see what was actually stored? Okay, so that's what this little program demonstrates how to do. The iterative part of the process is to go ahead and correct logical errors, or in this case, what's the word? Aesthetic issues, right? I forgot my question mark and blank space in my first prompt, so I fixed that. Okay, I went through and I fixed that. And then the next aesthetic thing I did was I put a blank print statement in here, so that when the output was displayed on the screen, now I show a blank line. Okay, it's really simple, but and so we're deliberately being simple because I'm trying to illustrate that this is the process that at least I go through as a programmer. I'll start with something very simple. I'll try to get it to work. I'll fix any syntax errors or any spelling errors. I'll fix any logical errors by checking the output, and then I'll work on the aesthetics. Does the displayed output look readable? Would it make sense if somebody else other than me read it? Now, I would not call this a finished test program by any stretch, but it does show me how to use the input command and the print statement. I mentioned in an earlier video that programs are never really finished, but they're abandoned, right? A friend of mine mentioned that, and I think that's true. But in order to work up to having a finished program, as I defined in air quotes, right, you have to document your code, because if you go back and read it a month later or a year later or 10 years later, you might not remember what you were thinking when you typed the code in the first place. So how you would document it, the easiest way to do it, and there's a couple of different ways, but the easiest way to do it is to put descriptive comments in the text of your program, but you want those comments to be ignored by the Python interpreter. Those comments are not instructions for the Python interpreter to act on, just the opposite. Those comments are to be ignored by the Python interpreter. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to go back up to line number 1, and I'm just going to press enter a few times to give me a few blank lines in the text editing space. Okay. And so one of the how you enter text into your program and have it ignored by the Python interpreter is you start your text with a pound sign or a hash symbol, number sign. They're all the same thing. And then again, for aesthetics, what I'll sometimes do is press a space, and then I'll say, then I'll write some sort of a comment. Okay, this is a very simple test program used to show how a simple input and print commands work. Okay, so then I can go back and I can read it. Let's see, this is a very simple test program used to show how simple, spell it right, how a simple input and print command works. And actually I'll say can be used. Okay, so the intention here is that I'm writing a program that I could look at a month from now if I can't remember if I can't remember how to use the input and the print commands. So I might also do this. I might put the date. Okay, I'm the only one that's writing source code, but if you were working with other people, maybe you're collaborating with some friends, or you're at work and you're collaborating with coworkers, you might want to put your initials here so that you know you're the one that wrote it. In this case, I don't need to do that. Okay, so I can't really think of anything else I would do. I might consider breaking this up into 2 lines. Oops. Mostly because if I go to print this out, I can have a small like index card size reminder of how this worked. But it's another aesthetic kind of thing. Okay, so another thing I could do is I could just put blank lines in here, and that might make it a little bit easier to understand. And the other thing I might do, which we haven't I haven't described or talked about yet, is sometimes people will indicate with a comment, program start, and let's press enter. We'll have another blank line, and down here I'll put another comment, program end. Okay, so you're just indicating where the program starts and where the program ends. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do it for a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 line program because it's pretty clear. But if your program was hundreds of lines long, and that might seem like overwhelming to even think about being able to create, but you will. If you continue on and learn, practice, you will. It's amazing how quickly the program lines start to add up. It might make sense to put a program start and program end. When you're learning, I think now is a good time to try and create some good habits for yourself. Not that I'm a perfect programmer, I'm not saying that, but I do have habits that I've sort of accumulated and formed for myself over the years, and those are what I'm sharing with you. All right, so I'm going to save. And anytime I save my source code, I want to go ahead and run it to make sure that I haven't made some kind of an error that's going to make the program not execute properly. Okay, so let's run it. What would you like to say? I'm going to say, hopefully, my Python videos help people learn. Okay, and that's a sincere wish. And what's my name? My name's Mac. Okay, so the program still runs. It got to the end of the program. It didn't find any errors. Here's our Python interpreter. I think at this point, we're going to wrap it. I'm already probably pretty long on this. I hope what I've said makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment. As I said earlier, I read them all. All I ask is to be polite, okay? Anything vulgar or crude was going to get deleted. But other than that, if you ask me a legitimate question, I will do my best to answer it in a way that you'll understand as from a beginner's point of view. All right? Until next time, happy Python programming.